Chalk.
Chalk, yep. MC Chalkskin.
Okay, very cool.
I am the hard hitter, quick witter, rhyme spitter. We go deep with Meryl Streep if my people could ever get her. 10-minute conversations with my best friends. It's time to begin. Chalkskin 10.
Yo, man, every time I think about like hobbits and like real smart midgets and like people that bang their sisters, I think about my next guest. You know the dude, he wrote Game of Thrones. George R.R. Martin. They're actually called Ice and Fire series of books, but you only care about the HBO show, George R.R. Martin. Yo, George R.R. Martin.
A blank sheet of paper, that's all it takes, and on that thin little slip of clean white, you can create a whole new world. And if skill and craft and inspiration are what moves that pen, the reader will slip into the skin of someone else and experience a whole new world that will affect them for the rest of their lives. Today, I speak with an author who's opened up a portal to a whole new world for millions of people. The first ever Chalkskin 10 two-parter with Mr. George R.R. Martin. Do you mind if I call you George, first of all?
No, that's fine.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so sometimes it's difficult for a writer to remember when they start writing. It's basically you're born with the pen in your hand. For example, I've been filling notebooks since I was 7. When did you start writing? Do you remember those early memories?
I still have some of the things I wrote, so I think it was actually even before I started school. My mother read to me when I was little, and I have notebooks, like I have an encyclopedia of space that I started to do at one point in an old school notebook, and I couldn't have been more than 5 or 6. I would draw like a planet, which was basically a round thing. Sometimes I'd draw continents or markings on it, and then I would block print below it, since I didn't know handwriting yet, who lived on that planet, Martians on Mars and Zoomians on the planet Zoom. I mixed real planets up with fake planets, ones I saw on TV on shows like Captain Video and Rocky Jones Space Ranger and others that were purely from my imagination.
What a writer reads influences how they write. What types of things influence your writing that you've read?
Well, I certainly read, in the beginning, I read a lot of comic books. I mean, we're here at the San Diego Comic-Con, and it's like a homecoming for me because I was a comics fan before anything else. I read Superman and Batman and, of course, all sorts of Uncle Scrooge comics and things like that when I was very young. And then a little later, Marvel started, and I was right there at the beginning as a young teenager, junior high school and high school, collecting all the Marvel comics, Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, Avengers, X-Men, Thor, etc. So all of those had an enormous influence, and my earliest published words were letters in the letter columns of Fantastic Four and Avengers and similar books, Dear Stan and Jack, that kind of thing. When I started reading actual books, the first one was Robert A. Heinlein's Half Spacesuit Will Travel, one of the great juveniles he wrote for Scribner's in the 1950s. Still, I think, probably the best of the juveniles, and still one of my favorite Heinlein books, maybe one of my top 3. Heinlein had an enormous influence on me as an author, and I went from him to the other great science fiction and fantasy authors, Robert E. Howard with Conan the Barbarian, Jack Vance, who became perhaps my favorite writer for most of my life. I discovered J.R. Tolkien, H.P. Lovecraft, Andre Norton, Asimov, on and on and on.
Speaking of that letter that you wrote, I read it. Fantastic Four number 20 was about Fantastic Four number 17. To me, what struck me was that it was very much in the style of Stan Lee's voice from the bullpen days. When did you start finding your own voice for your writing?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. I mean, when you start out as a writer, you're very much more influenced by the things that you read.
Right.
And as you continue to read, hopefully in a broader and broader genres and areas and styles, you're always encountering writers who are doing new things, and you're wondering, can I do that too? So, you can see in some of my early works Heinlein influence. You can see me trying to do Ursula K. Le Guin. You can see several efforts of mine to do Jack Vance, who I so admired, to capture their voice, at least see if I can do it. And these are all improving your craft kind of things. You want to learn to, can you use this tool? Can you use this technique? Can you use this voice? At some point in the evolution there, you do develop your own voice, but it's not a conscious thing. It's a evolutionary thing, and after a certain point, in your life and your career as a writer, you stop trying to imitate other people and just start trying to tell a story with all of these techniques that hopefully are now at your disposal.
I think a lot of writers do that today as fan fiction. What do you think about fan fiction?
Well, it depends on how you define fan fiction. I mean, I wrote in the 1950s and 60s what we then called fan fiction, which simply was fiction, stories written by fans and published in fanzines, in amateur magazines. But the stories were wholly original. I wasn't writing about anybody else's characters. I was writing about characters that I created, like Manta Ray and Garazan, the Mechanical Warrior, and the White Raider, my own superheroes of my teenage years. And they might have been influenced by some of the superheroes that were out there, but they were my own. The stories were my own. Everything was my own. And I'm all in favor of that. I mean, fanzines, I don't know what the modern equivalent is. There must be things on the internets, but the old dittoed fanzines and Mediocre fanzines of my youth were a great and important part in my development, not only of me, but of many, many young writers and comic fans at the time. Today, fan fiction has come to mean something very different. It's come to mean taking the characters from an established franchise like Star Wars or Star Trek or Harry Potter and writing original stories of that. I'm not in favor of that. It's a copyright violation, and I don't think it's particularly good for the franchises to have this kind of derivative fiction out there, and I don't think it's good for the people writing it if they aspire to be writers. I mean, to be a writer, you need certainly to master storytelling and prose, but you also need to master world building and character creation. If you're borrowing all your characters and you're borrowing the world, you're never gonna get those aspects of your craft and be able to arrive at the point where you can create your own worlds and create your own stories.
So you graduated with a journalism degree, which was kind of what you did back then when you wanted to be a creative writer. And you went into Clark University as the writer in residence. Seems like a pretty sweet gig, but you quit. What made you quit to become a full-time writer?
Well, being a writer in residence, it was Clark College in Dubuque, Iowa. I taught journalism there for 2 years, and then I wanted to write more. So I said, look, I'll be a writer in residence. Instead of teaching 4 courses, I'll teach 1 course a semester. I'll continue to advise the school newspaper, and you don't have to pay me, so it wasn't that big a thing here. But ultimately, I decided even that was taking too much of my time. Actually, and seriously, there was an incident that occurred late in the 70s when I was teaching college. I'd published a novel by then. Of course, I'd published a number of short stories. And my head was full of all the novels and so forth that I wanted to write. But I figured I had all the time in the world to write them. And meanwhile, teaching provided me with a steady income and a way to pay my mortgage and put my wife through college and the other things I was doing at the time. But I had a friend, another young writer. He wasn't quite as young as me. I was in my early 30s. He was 10 years older. He was 42 years old. And he'd started writing later than me, but he was a brilliant writer. And he won in 1977, he won the John W. Campbell Award for the best new writer in the field. Sold his first novel, been nominated for a bunch of Hugo and Nebula Awards. Really a brilliant rising star, I think. And like 3 months after he won the Best New Writer, he died of a massive heart attack while at his typewriter. And it occurred to me when that happened, gosh, Tom was only 42 years old. He was 10 years older than me, but I'm thinking I got all the time in the world to write these billion books that I want to write. Maybe I don't. So maybe it's time to roll the dice and quit teaching, walk away from the security. You know, I can always go back to it if I fail, if my books don't sell, if I can't pay my bills. I can always go back to it, but let's take the chance, let's roll the dice and see where it led. And I have never regretted that decision.
I don't think any of us regret that decision, George. Who do you write for? Do you write for yourself? Do you write for your readers? Or do you write for your characters?
Well, I create my characters, so I'm not writing for them. No, I write for myself. I think that's the only way you can really do it. You write the stories that you want to read. Those are the stories that are fun to write and that you're proud of writing afterwards. I've known writers who have tried to write for the readers. And the readers is such an abstract term, so, you know, essentially they're trying to write for the market. They're looking what's being published, what's being successful, and they're saying, oh, look, stories about cats are really popular. I'll write a story about cats. Of course, by the time they finish it, the cat phase has ended, and now everybody's writing about parakeets. You know, you can't kind of chase the market that way. You can't write in anticipation of, oh, this is very hot. You know, for one thing, you don't do it well, you know. You should write the stories that you want to write, the stories that excite you, the stories that you have a lot of passion and interest in writing. That's the stuff that you'll do best. I know people who are writing, you know, like zombie book. I hate zombies, goddamn zombies. But zombies are popular right now. I have to write about zombies. Well, they can write a zombie book, but I don't believe they're ever going to write a good zombie book. You know, if you want to write a good zombie book, you need to be like somebody like Max Brooks, who like loves zombies. Yeah. I mean, I know Max. He gets up in the morning, eats zombies, he drinks zombies. Zombies are his life, you know, and he's going to do the best zombie books of anybody in the world. And that's true no matter what your genre is or what your passion is. You write for yourself, and hopefully you find some other people out there who like what you're doing, and then you have some success.
So for you, it's sci-fi and fantasy. What draws you to those genres?
I like the imagination. I like the romance. I like the exotic feel of a certain kind of science fiction. I mean, I like science fiction, but I like a very specific kind of science fiction. The far future, the distant planets. I'm not a big fan of like 10 years in the future. You know, I was never a fan of cyberpunk. I'm a fan of Jack Vance, and, you know, Earth is spread out to 10,000 planets, and there are all sorts of weird aliens out there, and we're encountering, who knows what we're encountering, you know. It's the imagination and the wonder of those worlds, the feeling that anything can happen. The writers who take me to places I've never been before and show me things I've never seen before and make me think and wonder and blow my mind, as we used to say. That's the kind of stuff I like.
Chalkskin.
Yo, that was a cool video, right? So do me a favor. Hit like, hit share, hit subscribe. Not at the same time, because your computer will explode.
So what do you do to celebrate when you finish a story? I heard that you Tebow.
That I Tebow?
Yeah, like the...
No.
That interview is so cool. I think I'm gonna rap about it. Click here. Check out the rap. It's so dope.